Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. I am really excited today about this project. Today we're going to learn how to add stripes to crochet ribbing. This is a tutorial that I've been wanting to do for a while, so I'm really excited to bring it to you today. Right here you have your typical standard solid color, and then you have two variations of stripes. What I like about this is that you can add this to more sportier looks in your projects. And it's fairly easy. It's beginner friendly. The only thing that you need to know how to do is do ribbing, doing half double crochets. This particular cuff, I use half double crochet stitches and just color changes. There are other videos on that, or if you'd like for me to do a separate video, I can do that as well. If you're looking forward to getting started just as much as I am, stay tuned and let's get it going. First thing we're going to do is we're going to create this one first. Okay. We're going to start off by chaining 2 current yarn. We're going to call this our current yarn. When we alternate the yarn colors, we'll have a current yarn and then we'll have a resting yarn. I'm going to call one the current yarn. I'm going to call the other the resting yarn, so we don't get it confused. First thing you're going to do to create this stripe pattern is chain 2. And right now we're going to introduce that second color, color 2. So now you have 2 yarns. You have color 1, you have color 2. One is going to be your current yarn, one is going to be your resting yarn. Right now, the one that's on my finger, the working yarn, that's going to be our current yarn. The one sitting here looking lazy is going to be our resting yarn. So we have our 2 chains. We've introduced that second color. What you want to do once you introduce that second color is tighten that loop. Tighten that loop. We're going to drop the strand of the first yarn. We've tightened it up. And so now we're going to loop 2 of the second color. And as you can see, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 now. We're going to drop color 2 and make that the resting yarn. And we're going to pick up color 1 again to make that our current yarn. You're going to loop through again. You're going to tighten up, but not too tight, that current yarn. And we're going to loop 2. You're going to continue to hold on to both yarns while you're doing this. My resting yarn, which is color 2, I have resting between my fingers so I can get control of it. My first yarn, color 1, is now my current yarn. I'm holding that now. And since I've already did my chain 2 of that color, I'm now going to switch out again. I'm going to drop that. And you don't want to keep twisting in the same direction or you're going to end up with a tangled mess. You want to alternate your twists so your yarn doesn't get tangled up. So now I'm going to insert my second color again. I'm going to tighten it up a bit, like so. Do my chain 2. So as you can see here, we now have 4 of the stripes that we need. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to finish it off. I'm going to drop that second color. Tighten it up. Tighten it up. You don't want to do this too tight. You don't want to do it too loose either. And I'll show you why in a second. I'm going to finish off the chain by chaining our final 2. And there's our 10 stitches. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I don't know if anybody else does this, but you see this loop on my hook? I lock that off. I don't know why I do that, but it gives me security that I won't go into that for whatever reason while I'm working my rows. But as you see here, we have our 10 stitches. to begin building our rows. And what you're going to do first, and we're doing half double stitches, half double crochet stitches. We're going to go into that first stitch, create our first half double crochet, which is a full half double crochet, untouched. And now for that second stitch, because of the pattern that we're doing, we're going to be alternating after that second stitch for this particular pattern. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to go through until we get our 3 loops on the hook. But for this, because we're alternating colors, we're only going to yarn through those first 2 loops. And you're going to do this until you continue on with your ribbing. That working stitch will now become your resting stitch. You want to always bring your resting stitch forward. That way, when you get to the end and turn your work, it'll be there waiting for you. But for now, we're going to use it to carry throughout. That's why we need it forward. You're going to do this for that ending yarn as well. So, and what I'm about to do now will be the only time you'll need to do this. And I'll explain now. You're going to bring that new yarn color through those last 2 loops. Pull it taut a little bit so you have cleaner work. You're going to bring this through. You're going to yarn over. To keep it clean, we're picking up all of that loose yarn. So we have our resting yarn here. We're going to run our hook over that. We don't count that stitch. We count this stitch and this stitch of the colors in our chain. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to take, keep in mind, let me go back if anybody got confused. So after we did our first half double crochet, second half double crochet, we're only going to loop the first 2. We're going to insert the new color in the last 2. We're going to yarn over. We're going to take our resting yarn that's sitting here. We're going to go through that first chain, making sure that this resting yarn is sitting right here on top and in the front, so we know it gets picked up. You're going to take it through. You see this in the back? You see this chain in the back? All that's going to be picked up in the stitch. This is now our current yarn, this color number 2. You see this loop right here? We're going to pick that up and add that into this stitch as well. This is going to be the only time you'll need to do that. You want to hold on with your index finger all of that stitching so we can get that stitch over that. And that will pick up all of that excess yarn. That's the only time in this technique that you'll ever need to do that. And what you're going to do with your working yarn now is yarn over and run that through all of that. You're going to run that through all of that, and then you'll go through like that. You want to pull everything taut but not tight. And as you can see, all of that got picked up. All of that got picked up. I'm going to keep going. And because we did a whole double crochet without color change, this is what we're going to do for this particular pattern again. Now that we've picked all of that up, and that's a whole half double crochet, if that makes any sense. What I mean by whole half double crochet is we didn't add any yarn. We didn't add any color. We didn't add color into that half double crochet. But we're going to do it with this next one because we're going to change our color again. Because we have our resting yarn in front of us, it'll be easier for us now to pick up as we go along. So we're going to yarn over. We're going to go into that next stitch through, making sure you pick up all that in the back. and go through half. Go through those first two. You see that? Pull it taut again. Now, for now we're done with the light blue color. That's now our resting yarn. We're going to pick up the dark blue. We're going to run through and bring it through the second part of that half double crochet to finish off our 2 stitches there. You have our 2 stitches here, our 2 stitches there. So now we're going to move forward, continue to yarn over. Keep in mind, I'm picking up all our yarns. We're not going to go into that one. We're going to go into the next one, this one and this one. We're going to go through there, go through that hole. You still have all that in the back that you need to pick up. All that's going to be included. And it's going to look a little crazy right now because this is your first row. But as you move forward, you'll see how doing this cleans all of that up. So, excuse me. And this is why you don't want to do it too loose either. So again, you're going to go through that stitch right there. If I can get it through there. I've done this a million times, so. Alright, so we're going to bring the crochet hook through there. It's through there now. Flip it over. And all that loose yarn from that stitch, we're going to pick all of that up. Keep this resting yarn out of the way for now. But all of that is forward because all of it is going to be carried into this new stitch. We're going to pick up all of that with that. I'm sorry, we're going to pick all of that up and bring the yarn through to create that first half double crochet stitch. You look on the back, I picked it up. So you won't see this. Once we get done with this row, all of this will make sense. So that's your first whole half double crochet. Now you know we're going to change colors with this next stitch. So you're going to yarn over again, go through that second loop or that second chain, bring it through, still holding on to your resting yarn. Now we're only going to loop through those first 2 stitches like so. Okay. Now the blue, the darker blue, is going to become our resting yarn. We're going to pick up again because we're going to go into this light blue. Even though this is a resting yarn, we still have to carry this yarn throughout the work until we get to the end. Resting yarn means we're not working on that color right now. So again, we're going to yarn through these 2 stitches. And we have our resting yarn, but we're going to carry our resting yarn through the rest of our work. We're not working that stitch. We're working this stitch and this stitch. That's the stitch that created the color change for that. That will disappear. It looks like a stitch, but it's not. That will disappear once we get to our second row. So keep that in mind. We're going to go through that stitch. I'm trying to look at the camera and do this at the same time. All right. You see that loose? You see that loose stitch on the back? We're going to pick up all of that looseness on the back. Go through here again and create our whole half double crochet. Always pulling this, not too tight, but just taut enough to tighten all that up and make it look better. Okay. We're going to do the second one. Keep in mind, because we're doing the second one, we're going to only work that chain stitch. I'm going to pull our hook through there. Keep in mind of picking up that excess on the back. Bring it through. Our resting yarn is still in front of us because we're going to need it to finish off this row. We're going to yarn through those first 2 stitches. Now here's what you do when you get to the end of the row with your current yarn and you're done with the color. You're going to move that to the back. You're going to move that to the back so when you turn your work, it's there waiting on you. So we're going to move that to the back. We're done with that now. We're going to finish it off with our dark blue. Yarn through that last 2. And we don't need to carry yarn for this dark blue. Why? Because once we finish off this row, it's all dark blue. When you turn it over, I'm going to finish this off so you can see what I'm talking about. Let's go ahead and go through and finish off these last 2 chains. Tighten that, a nice snug pull. We'll tighten that a bit. So we're going to finish off this last 2 chains like so. Chain 1, you're going to turn your work. How you know you did it right is when you turn your work, you don't see those loose strands that created the yarn change in the beginning of the chain. And that looks crazy now, but that will go away once you work your rows. This was my beginning. That's what that looked like when I first started that, and that's the finished project. But this is why you don't have to, it's not necessary for what I'm doing. This particular one is not necessary to carry that blue into that dark blue and create unnecessary bulk, because that's going to be worked twice. We created this row to finish it off here, and we're going to go through it again for the second row. And because there's no blue there, there's no need to add that unnecessary bulk. Now, like you would with any other ribbing, you're going to go into the back loops, that half double crochet. You're going to yarn over. You're only going to go into the back loop to pick that up. And then the same goes. You're going to create a whole half double crochet. You know that you're going to be facing a color change for that second half double crochet. So we're going to yarn through again. Bring it up. We're only going to go through that first 2 loops. Bring your yarn forward, which will now create your resting yarn, but you're also going to be carrying that resting yarn throughout your work until you get to the end again. So now, what you're going to do here is yarn through, and to avoid this, we're going to pick that up as well. We're going to yarn through again, bring that under there. Let's do that again. Let's do that again. So after we create that contrasting for that last 2 loops, we're going to yarn over. We're going to take that yarned over hook and go under this broad strand so we can get rid of it and add it into the work. Bring our resting yarn over our hook so we can get to the back and pick up that back loop. Pick up that back loop. Yarn through again and pick up all of the strands and bring it through that first whole half double crochet. Pull everything so it's neat, and as you can see, everything is in the stitch. Everything is in the stitch. I'm going to go to that second one, yarn over, go under your resting so we can go through our back loop, bring everything through, only go through those first 2 with that color. We're going to bring that forward and make that our new resting stitch, or resting yarn, I'm sorry. So we can start building that second color. Yarn over, resting yarn under, go through that back loop, bring everything forward. Yarn over, go through, back loop. For the second stitch, only yarn through the first 2 loops. After you do that, that's our new resting yarn. I'm going to pick up that new color because we're color changing again. Yarn over, go under the resting yarn, carry till we get to the back loop. Yarn all that through. You can slightly see the ribbing starting to form. That's your raised stitch. That's your raised row of your rib. That's the opposite row. Yarn over again, go under your resting yarn, pick up that back stitch, bring her through, and because that's the second stitch, we're going to yarn through that first 2 loops. We're going to leave the top. Now we're done with this color, so what do? We take it to the back so it can be there when it's ready to turn your work. Be there waiting on us when it's time to turn the work. Take that dark blue through there, yarn through, pick up that back loop, I'll pull on that, made that kind of snug. You see it starting to form? You see it starting to form? Finish off that row, picking up that last back row stitch before we turn our work. Chain 1 and turn your work. Turn your work. Let's do that again. Yarn over, go through that back loop, create that whole half double crochet stitch, go through the second back loop, yarn through those first 2 loops, bring that yarn strand over. That's our new resting yarn. Pick up the previous resting yarn, loop it over this way, it'll be easier. Loop the one that was resting when you turned your work over the new resting, like so. That way you can yarn over and it'll be easier to pick it up to include it in the work. You see how both of those are laying that way? You go through both of those, hold on to them with the index finger, turn your work, go through that back loop, pick up everything. I hold everything together with my 2 fingers. That way I can get the yarn through all strands and bring it through that way. Okay, see how they picked all that up? It's a lot of moving parts, but it makes sense the further along you go. You're going to yarn over again. We know that this is going to be a contrast, so we're going to pick up that back loop. You see that? You see how my working yarn is at the top? I have my hook through the back loop, and then I have my resting yarn in the front. That's what you want. And then you want to hold everything together with your thumb. You want to pick up that yarn, run it through that back loop, resting loop should be on the inside of that now. We're going to yarn through 2 loops. You see, I tug it a lot as I go along. Not tight, just taut. So everything is together. Everything is together. And once you get that through there, we know that we're about to change colors now. So new resting yarn is this color. I'm going to pick up this yarn, run it through those last 2 loops, run everything through again, through the back loop. Hope you can see that. Hold everything together. This I can go straight through because I'm not doing any color changes just yet. And there you go. That's Sassy scratching up the couch. Yarn over, take it through that resting yarn, pick up that back loop, bring it through, only yarn through the first 2, like so. Okay? Now, because we're changing colors again, resting yarn, rest in front of us. And there you have it. There you have it. That is how you add stripes to a half double crochet cuffed rib. Now, to do, yes, I'm taking all this apart. To do the next pattern, which will probably be easier for some people because it's less color transitioning, but the technique is still all the same. And because I have 3 here, I have 4 here, and I have 3 here, we know that we're going to begin this chain of 3. I'm going to begin this chain of 3. Starting with that first chain on the hook, we're going to 1, 2, 3. So now we have 3 chains, or 3 stitches, and we have a working loop. I'm going to run that new color, going to introduce our new color by running it through. And it doesn't matter about these tails, how long they are, if they drag or whatever, because that will either be cut off or worked into the final work once we're done. So now that we've introduced that new color, we got to tighten up that loop. Tighten up that loop from that first color. We're going to bring it down to fit our hook, but not too tight. Bring it down to fit our hook, but not too tight. So now that's our resting yarn, but we're going to hold on to it because we're going to pick it up again once we get in the amount of stitches we want in this new color. So we have 3 here. We're going to add 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have our 3, we have our 4. We're going to drop that color. I'm going to pick up the first color again, bring it through that working loop, You see that stitch? All that's going to get picked up once we build that first row. And now that we have that, we have our first new color loop on the hook. We're going to tighten up. We're going to tighten that up. Going to tighten the previous color up from that. Going to yarn through and create our last 3 stitches. And there you go. You only have 1 loose strand of yarn to worry about tucking. And like I did with the previous one. See, I got my work all twisted up because I didn't do it while I was working the chain. Okay. So now we have our 3, 4, 3, which is 10 stitches in the width of the chain that we're creating. Then I have that working stitch, which I go through and lock, so I don't have to worry about it again. I'm gonna yarn over, half double crochet, yarn over again, half double crochet. And we know that we're approaching a color change on this. So just like on the previous pattern, we're going to yarn over, we're going to go through that color or that chain, not that one, that one. We're going to go through, but we're only going to go through the first 2 loops because we're going to change colors. We're going to bring that working yarn towards us to become our new resting yarn. And now we're going to pick up the strand of the previous color and run it through those final 2 loops. Now to move forward, you're going to yarn over, you're going to go through not only your resting yarn in the front, but you're going to go to the back and you're going to pick up that loose strand hanging in the back. You're going to pick that up and add all that to your work. Bring that forward, yarn through. Tighten everything up a bit. So that blue is going to continue to carry through all of that. That first dark blue is going to continue to carry through all of this light blue until we get to the end. So we're going to do it again. I didn't pick it up. I'm sorry, I didn't pick it up. Let's do that again. I didn't pick it up. I picked everything up, but that I didn't add it to the chain. So we're going to yarn over. We're going to go through not that chain, but this chain, because the other one is the one we used to add on the dark blue color. We're going to pick up, so I went through the chain. We're carrying our resting yarn in the front. We're picking up this loose strand that we created in the back when we made the chain, and then we have our working yarn. All 3 of those strands are going to go through that chain stitch. Pull through like so, and then it gets picked up. Let's do it again so you can see what I'm talking about. Yarn over, go through that second, that one right there, right there. Run the hook through, still picking up our resting yarn, that loose chain in the back, and our working yarn. So there's 3 strands that you're running through a stitch. Okay, doing it again. Yarn over, go through that third, still picking up our resting yarn in the front, picking up that loose stitching in the back, the rest of that loose stitch in the back, and our working yarn. And because this is our 3rd stitch, this is our 3rd whole half double crochet stitch. That's what you have there. Now we know because of this last stitch comes before we have to change color. We know that we're going to yarn over, we're only going to go through those first 2 loops. See that? I'm going to go through there, pick up our front resting yarn, We're going to pick up the last of that loose strand that was in the back, and we're going to run that new working yarn through all 3 strands, but we're only going to take the yarn through the first 2 loops. Take that working yarn, put it to the back. That will now become a resting yarn that will be waiting on us when we turn our work. So now we're going to pick up our resting yarn, make it our current yarn, run that through the final 2 loops, and I tug a bit on that strand in the back so everything is nice and tight and neat. Not tight. Finish off our row. Again, we are not going through the stitch that has the color in it. We're going through 1, 2, and 3. So it's, this color is dark. That's a stitch, that's a stitch, that's a stitch. That stitch with that V there, better way to understand this is don't touch the chain that's touching that color. You go through the next ones. So you have 1, 2, and 3. It may not look it now because it's dark, but you go through, tighten it a bit, and there you have it. And then you can finish off easy. Okay. Half double crochet, half double crochet, half double crochet, chain 1, turn your work. And your new resting yarn is right there waiting for you. And everything's tucked in. All those loose strands that created that chain initially are all tucked in the work. We're going to proceed with working our second row. So you're going to yarn over, and just like with typical crochet ribbing, we're going to go into the back loops. This is probably a more beginner friendly because there's not much transition. There's not much yarn carry with this, but you'll get the ring of it once you keep practicing. Because I'm doing 3, 2 of my half double crochet stitches will be whole, but now that we're going into that third one, we're going to hit that back loop, bring the yarn through. We're only going to go through 2, the first 2 of that stitch. Bring that yarn forward. Bring our working yarn forward, which will now be our new resting yarn. Even though it's a resting yarn, we will be carrying it through this light blue color until we get to the end and we can drop it again and pick it up again. I'm sorry. Take the previous resting yarn, which is now going to be our current yarn, bring it over that new resting yarn. Run it through those last 2 hoops. Yarn over. Bring it through both of those. Hold it with the index finger. Turn over to pick up that back loop. Take your working yarn. You have 1, 2, 3 strands. You're running all that through to create that first whole half double crochet. Tongue tied. All right, so as you can see, I have my resting yarn. I have my working yarn. To keep your yarn from being untangled, you want to make sure that when you're alternating colors that you kind of do it in a pattern like this. You don't want to keep changing it out in the same manner. If you change over and one yarn goes down like that, when it's time to pick it up again, you want to go over like that. That way your yarn doesn't get too tangled up. So now we're going to work out the rest of this row. I'm going to yarn over, pick up the resting yarn, back loop, go through the back loop, go through all layers, second one, Yarn over again, pick up that back loop, yarn over again. There you have it. Yarn over again. And because we know that this is our fourth and last half double crochet before we change color, we know that only the first 2 loops are going to be yarn through, like so. We know we're done with that light blue color, so we're going to take that and put it in the back, so that can be the resting yarn waiting on us when we get back to that side. And resume going through those final 2 loops, going through your back loops to finish off the row. First half double crochet, tug on that dark blue strand in the back so all of that is tight and neat, and finish off your row with your last 2 half double crochets. Okay, turn your work. Got our new color waiting on us, already ready and waiting on us. I get tongue-tied a lot. Y'all have to excuse me. Chain through, back loops, back loops. That's 2 whole half double crochets. Third one, back loop, I'm going to go through, bring it forward. I'm only going to go through those first 2 because I know I'm about to change colors. I'll take that current yarn and move it forward, but I'm going to move it off to the side. I'm going to pick up my previous resting yarn strand and run it through those last 2 loops. Yarn over, run it through both of those strands, flip it over so I can pick up that back loop, and then run my working yarn through those 3. Bring it through, create my first whole half double crochet. I'm going to repeat this until I get to the last stitch where I need to change out the color. Okay. You can see the raised stitches as well as the under stitches to create that rib effect. And there you have it. You have your narrow stripes, you have your broad stripes, your solid, and that's how you add stripes to ribbon. Now, if you stay tuned to my channel, on a later video, I will show you the project that I am using this technique with my ribbing. You'll see the project that I'm adding that to. I've already created the neckline, which is another technique that I learned how to do. So this is not a complete straight edge like you see in that ribbon. I learned how to go diagonal. That way I can create that neckline, and then I can add that into the top of the garment that I'm working on. If you like this technique and you find anything useful on my channel, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, share. I appreciate you all for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Hold up, guys, I forgot to add that once you get your desired ribbon, to go ahead and start crocheting on either side to build the rest of your project. Again, thank you, like, comment, subscribe.